In the city of Miami, Captain Jackie from the Tactical Narcotics Team comforts a distressed informant who is convinced that someone has been closely watching her and her home. Jackie reassures her, telling her she is almost there. As Jackie exits her car and proceeds on foot, she is suddenly struck by a bullet. Despite her injuries, Jackie manages to type a message to someone. Moments later, she is executed by one of the men wearing ski masks. Following Jackie's death, her team, Detectives Numa, Mike, and Lolo, along with Sergeant J.D., are brought in for questioning by the FBI. Meanwhile, Chief Tom speaks with Lieutenant Dane, who was recently promoted after Jackie's death. Tom asks Dane if the feds have cleared him. Dane nods, saying they accepted his alibi. Tom then asks what Jackie had been pursuing before she was killed. Dane replies, "Money, lots of it." He adds that he's frustrated the feds aren't taking Jackie's murder seriously. Tom sighs, admitting the division is falling apart, and that, to make matters worse, the feds want the narcotics unit dismantled. In another room, one of the FBI agents, Dell, asks Numa whether she and Jackie were close, and if Jackie's death has affected her. Numa nods, saying they were close, and corrects him. It wasn't a death, it was a murder. Dell then questions the team about their job duties, pointing out that their work mostly involves seizing drugs and large amounts of cash. He asks whether that ever creates conflicts of interest, given the large amount of money involved. The team unanimously answers no. Finally, the FBI interviews Sergeant J.D. J.D. asks why they're really here, aside from trying to dirty up some cops. Dell replies that it's probably the easiest money they can make right now, given how poorly the city pays its police officers. J.D. fires back, asking whether Dell thinks someone from narcotics killed Jackie. Dell responds, "I didn't say that." J.D. tells them to focus on catching Jackie's killer instead of pointing fingers. Ignoring the comment, Dell says he's already interviewed the detectives and the lieutenant. Then adds, "The lieutenant who took your promotion." J.D. responds that if anyone deserved the promotion, it was Dane. "So, you're friends?" Dell asks. J.D. nods, then tells the FBI that if they hadn't dismantled VCAT, they would have already found Jackie's killer. Back with Dane, he tells Tom that he and his team can find whoever murdered Jackie and asks if the department will authorize overtime. Tom shakes his head, warning that any clandestine investigation would only give the feds more ammunition and could result in the unit being shut down entirely. In the conference room, Dell asks J.D. if he was close with Jackie. When J.D. doesn't answer, Dell smirks. "What, cat got your tongue?" "You're a cunt," J.D. snaps back. Dell shrugs and says they all know how close J.D. and Jackie were. J.D. remains silent. Dell then asks who the second gun in J.D.'s double shoulder rig belongs to. J.D. responds by punching him. As the scuffle breaks out, Chief Tom asks Dane what's going on. Dane replies that J.D. is fighting with his brother. Later, Dane jokes with J.D. "So, how'd it go with your brother?" "He's still an asshole," J.D. replies. He then adds that the feds are nowhere close to catching Jackie's killer, if they are here staring at their faces. Dane nods, saying either the feds think Jackie was dirty or believe someone on the team was involved. J.D. says that if he were the feds, he'd throw chum in the water, shake things up, and yank the lines to see what surfaces. Later, the entire team winds down after the interrogations. They joke and mock Dell, making him the punchline. Everyone laughs until Numa asks why the cops keep talking about money. Mike wonders if it has something to do with the stash house hits people have been whispering about. Lolo asks for more details about the rumor. J.D. explains that they know stash houses are where cartels usually hide their money. And lately, there's been talk of a heist team made up of dirty cops and feds working together to steal that money. Meanwhile, Dane looks at a message mentioning a stash house. He pauses, then looks down at a photo of his son. Outside, DEA agents pull their armored vehicle into the station parking lot. The agents, Nix and Dio, step out and greet the team, who also happen to be their close friends. Numa quickly turns serious. She tells them that she suspects the feds are more interested in framing and dismantling the TNT division than in finding Jackie's killer. Dio nods, and also pointing out that if VCAT hadn't been disbanded, arrests would have already been made. At that moment, Dane exits the building and greets the agents before turning to the team. He mentions a Crime Stopper tip that just came in, Money supposedly stashed in a house in Hialeah. Lolo says their shift is almost over and asks if this means overtime. Dane shakes his head. There's no overtime thanks to budget cuts. He tells Lolo to bring Wilbur, the money-sniffing dog. Numa catches up to Dane and asks how much money they're talking about. 250 grand, Dane replies. That's an easy rip, Numa mutters. Mike asks whether they should loop in the Hialeah Police Department. Dane says no, explaining that their department is a mess right now. Mike presses again, asking how much they expect to recover. About 150 grand, Dane answers. Shortly after, the team rolls out to the location, a quiet cul-de-sac lined with modest homes. JD asks Dane what the plan is. We lie, Dane says flatly. Get the homeowner to sign a consent to search form for drugs, not money. Wilbur immediately starts acting up and urinates near the front door. Lolo says she's never seen Wilbur react like this and asks how much cash they're dealing with. 75 grand, Dane replies. That's impossible, Lolo says, and points out that Wilbur wouldn't be this alert over that little. Dane gets the homeowner's attention. He tells her they received a tip about drugs being stashed in the house. JD asks for her name. Desi, the woman replies. Dane asks whether anyone else is inside. Desi says it's just her. He then requests permission to come in. Suspicious, Desi asks for a warrant. Dane admits they don't have one, but says they do have a consent to search form. If she has nothing to hide, she can sign it and allow them to search the house. After a moment of hesitation, Desi signs the form. Inside, Lolo removes Wilbur's leash. The dog immediately starts barking at the ceiling. Dane asks Desi what's in the attic. She says she's never been up there and insists she doesn't have any drugs. JD corrects her. The dog alerts on money, not narcotics. Desi's expression shifts instantly. Dane and JD head up to the attic. JD notices how clean it is compared to the rest of the house and asks Desi why. She repeats that she's never been up there and adds that the house used to belong to her grandmother. JD notices a thin wire sticking out from the wall and pulls it, causing a hidden panel behind a statue to slide open. Inside, they discover several drums. Dane orders the team to start removing the containers while he and JD question Desi. Dane asks Desi how long she's lived in the house. Desi says it's been 2 months. She explains that her grandmother passed away recently and that she had been caring for her on her own for the last few years. She adds that the house is in probate and that her sister is contesting the will, even though she never helped care for their grandmother. JD asks Desi if she knew there was money in the house, noting the look on her face earlier when he mentioned the dog sniffing for cash. Desi denies having any knowledge of it. JD tells her that knowingly or not, she's in possession of illegal cash and is now implicated. Desi argues that it isn't technically her home. The estate is still in probate. Dane smirks. That's pretty slick. Who gave you that loophole? No one, Desi says. She notices the tattoos on Dane's hand and asks what they mean. Dane explains that the first one says, "Are we the good guys?" And the second one means, "We are and always will be." Mike gets Dane and JD's attention from the attic. They head up and crack open one of the drums. Inside is far more cash than the tip suggested. Dane counts one container, then eyeballs the rest. This is over 20 million, he says. The team is stunned. JD orders everyone back downstairs. But before they leave, Dane asks the team for their phones. Numa, shocked, asks if he doesn't trust them. Money makes people crazy, Dane replies. He collects everyone's phones, including Desi's. JD asks if Dane wants his phone as well, but Dane shakes his head and asks JD to help him figure things out instead. JD is clearly unhappy with how Dane is handling the situation. He asks, "How much did the tip say?" 300 grand, Dane replies. Dane orders Mike and Numa to pull the remaining containers from the wall and start counting the money. JD stops him, saying they need to move the cash immediately. Dane argues that protocol requires counting the money at the site of the seizure, but JD snaps back that the rule doesn't apply to such a large amount of cash. Dane refuses to budge. JD suggests at least calling the chief, but Dane says he doesn't trust anyone right now. That's when JD reveals that Jackie had told him about a rip like this shortly before she was killed. A lot of money, JD adds. Just then, Lolo asks Dane if she can call her daughters to say goodnight. Dane refuses. JD tells him they should at least call his brother or Nix, but Dane shuts that down too. JD yells, calling Dane an asshole for how he's acting now. Overhearing the argument, Desi warns them that they're making a mistake. She tells them to take whatever money they want and walk away before it gets worse for everyone. Mike rushes down from the attic and tells Dane a police car just turned onto the street. Dane and JD step outside and identify themselves as members of the narcotics unit to the local cops. One officer says they were never notified about a raid, but JD dismisses him, saying patrol officers don't need to be informed. The officer tells him to go fuck himself, and says he is calling his superiors. As the cruiser pulls away, JD notices the officer riding shotgun and recognizes him, but the cop pretends not to know him. JD explains to Dane that the officer was from VCAT, and that his partner probably is too, suggesting they might be reassigned. When Dane asks if JD thinks they knew about the RIP money, JD shrugs. They both decide to grab their vests, extra weapons, and magazines as a precaution. Inside the house, Desi is handcuffed to a chair while Lolo, Numa, and Mike move the containers into the garage. As they work, Mike voices his concern about how Dane is handling the situation, especially not notifying higher command. He adds that Jackie never would have handled the case this way. Numa, however, reminds him that Dane is their boss and they need to follow his lead. Dane and JD enter the garage and order everyone to put their vests on. Dane then apologizes to Lolo for not letting her use her phone. She nods, understanding. Dane tells Mike to take cover outside. Then he grabs a stack of cash and gives instructions to Lolo and Numa. If a stack is labeled 250, leave it alone. But if there's no label, count it. Then he laughs and adds that it'd be a lot easier if they just stole the money. Outside, Mike discreetly sends a text to the chief using a burner phone. Inside, Desi admits to Dane that ever since she moved in, she's been getting calls from someone telling her to leave the house for a few hours. She insists she doesn't know who's calling. Dane asks what she meant earlier when she told them to take the money and walk away. Desi explains that's what she was instructed to say if the cops ever came sniffing around. She notices a photo of a young boy and asks Dane about it. "My son," Dane says. As Dane reviews Desi's file, he realizes she's a confidential informant. Her statements were sealed for her protection. Desi admits her ex-boyfriend stole drugs and money, and she cooperated with police to stay safe. Dane and JD press her, accusing her of knowingly letting cartel money be stored in the house and profiting from it. Desi stays silent. Suddenly, an old rotary phone rings. Desi panics and tells them not to answer, but JD picks it up anyway. A distorted voice warns them to leave the house within 30 minutes with $150,000, or everyone will die. JD hangs up and looks at Dane. "We've got 30 minutes before they show up." Then JD confronts Dane, asking why he lied about the tip. Why he told him it was 300 grand when the caller just said it was 150. He demands to know what's really going on. Dane brushes him off, telling him to let him handle it. JD snaps back, saying Dane's been acting strange ever since they arrived. He demands to see the Crime Stopper tip, admitting he doesn't trust Dane anymore and thinks he might be planning to steal the money. Dane tells him he doesn't have the tip with him right now. JD sighs and tells Dane to call the chief, or he will. In the garage, the girls count the cash. Lolo holds up a single banded stack and tells Numa that just this one stack would be enough to change her life. Meanwhile, JD calls Nix from the DEA. He explains the Crime Stopper tip, his voice tense as he reveals the RIP involves a massive amount of cash. He also shares his concern that Dane still hasn't called it in to the chief. Nick suggests a troubling possibility. What if the stash house they're in right now was the same one Jackie had been working on, and Dane found out? He points out that since Dane was second in command, he may have discovered it. Nix even proposes that Dane could have killed Jackie to steal the money. JD defends his friend, but Nix pushes back, reminding him that Dane lost his son to cancer. His marriage has fallen apart, and now he has nothing left to lose. JD swears and says he'll call his brother, but Nix tells him not to involve the feds. He asks for JD's location and says he'll be there in 10 minutes. Inside the house, Dane tells Lolo and Numa that they need to come to some kind of arrangement as he's fed up with his current pay. Outside, Mike notices that the houses in the cul-de-sac are starting to light up one by one. JD joins him moments later. Mike points it out, and they realize for the first time that every house feels empty. No one seems to be inside. Mike assumes a cartel must have bought the entire block. Then JD notices a porch light blinking. He tells Mike it's Morse code and spells it out. Pigs. JD tells Mike to inform Dane while he goes to check it out. At the same time, Mike receives a message from the chief. Inside, Dane contacts the chief and reports the stash house location and the size of the rip, about $150,000. He tells the chief they plan to count the money and leave on their own. Minutes later, Desi tells Mike that Dane and the two girls are planning to steal the money as she overheard them talking in the garage. She also says Dane lied to his superior, telling them the money was only $150,000. Desi adds that he is the only one she can trust. Dane opens the garage door at that moment, and Mike informs him that JD just went to check out a house up the street where someone was operating a porch light in Morse code. So, the two of them go out to check it out. Soon after they leave, the phone rings again. Numa answers. The voice on the other end warns them to leave the house within 10 minutes, or they will all die. Meanwhile, Mike and Dane walk down the street. Mike points out the house JD entered. Dane asks Mike if he's a snitch. Mike just laughs. Dane tells him to head back to the house while he checks the place. Mike then quietly alerts someone on the phone, telling them that Dane is about to steal the cash and that they need to move now. Back with JD, he receives a message from Nix. At that moment, someone raises a gun to the back of his head. Meanwhile, Desi begs Mike to uncuff her. He tells her that nothing bad is going to happen to her and says he's already called someone and they're on their way. He heads into the garage and asks the girls if they need help counting the money. Coldly, they tell him they don't need his help. Shortly after, Dane enters the garage. Numa tells him about the call. They have 10 minutes before they start killing people. Mike asks where JD is. Dane replies that they got separated. Suddenly, the lights go out. Gunfire erupts, bullets raining down. In the chaos, Lolo is shot. Dane tells Numa to stay with her while he and Mike go after the masked attackers. Back inside, Numa tends to Lolo's wound and uncuffs Desi. Outside, Mike and Dane close in on the gunmen. Dane manages to kill one of them, but the other two escape. JD stops Dane from killing the man, pointing out that he was the one operating the porch light. He tells Dane the man is a cartel member and explains that they didn't hit the house, but someone else did. The man calls his boss and hands the phone to Dane while instructing Mike to step back. On the phone, the boss explains that their cartel is not responsible for the violent attack that took place tonight. He says they have no interest in the money and want no further heat, especially after the death of the police officer. JD asks him directly if his cartel was responsible for Jackie's death. From a distance, Mike watches them. When they regroup, he asks what happened. Dane tells him the cartel is walking away from the money and that they weren't the ones who attacked them. They return to the garage. Dane tells the girls that the cartel didn't hit them and is walking away from the cash. Lolo suggests they vouch the Crime Stopper tip money and split the rest, but Numa reminds her that Dane already called the chief. JD asks when. Dane replies, earlier, about the house, the rip. JD then drops a bombshell, revealing there is no Crime Stopper tip. Dane made it up to steal the money. He reminds everyone that Dane was Jackie's second in command, so if Jackie knew about this stash house, Dane did too. Dane denies the accusation and counters by accusing JD of orchestrating the attack. He says JD recognized the ex-VCAT detective and points out that things have been messy since then. Dane also accuses JD of disappearing for nearly 30 minutes and returning with an armed cartel member. JD counters with another piece of information. The cartel believes Jackie was killed by someone on her own team. He looks straight at Dane and calls him a cop killer. The two start throwing punches. Mike and Numa rush in to break it up. Then, Dane orders Mike to go outside and keep an eye out for Desi. Outside, Mike searches his vest but realizes his burner phone is missing. Meanwhile, JD gets a call from Nix and urges him to come quickly. He tells Nix that Dane has gone rogue and is about to steal the rip. JD asks if a full team is coming. Nix explains that due to budget cuts, no one wants to pick up extra shifts, but reassures JD that he's bringing an armored vehicle. Then Nix asks how much the rip is worth. $20 million, JD answers. Nix tells him they'll be there shortly. Back in the garage, the girls finish counting the cash and begin stuffing it into black bags. Suddenly, they notice fire spreading through the garage. They rush the money outside just as the armored vehicle pulls up. Dane looks surprised to see Nix, but quickly recovers. He tells Mike to stash the money in the truck. Then he orders JD to stay behind with the girls. JD snaps back, shouting that he doesn't trust Dane, that's why he called Nix. They start arguing again, but Nix steps in and breaks them apart, ordering both of them into the vehicle. Inside the armored truck, JD draws his gun for precaution. Dane does the same. Dane asks where they are taking the money. A DEA held Fargo near the hospital, Nix replies. JD types out a message. Nix asks who it's for. JD says he just messaged the chief about the meeting location, adding that Dane already informed him. No, he didn't, Mike says. He explains that the chief knows about the rip, but not the total amount. How would you know that? Dane snaps back. Then he adds, you still haven't answered my question from earlier. Are you a snitch? Mike tells him to go fuck himself. Then Mike reveals that Desi told him everything. How Dane reported the rip as only $150,000 and planned to split the remaining money with Lolo and Numa. Dane smirks and admits it was all part of his plan. Desi heard exactly what he wanted her to hear. In a flashback, Dane signals the girls to play along and declares that they're robbing the rip. Dane continues, explaining that once Desi heard the rip was being stolen, she confided in Mike because he seemed like a good guy. Dane says he knew she'd tell Mike about the call to the chief and the $150,000 figure, but reminds him it wasn't the first time he'd used that number. He told Mike the same amount earlier, while giving different figures to different officers. JD cuts in sharply, reminding everyone that whoever called the house said the same thing. Take the $150,000, or everyone will die. Mike tells them they have his phone. JD counters that he's been using a burner. Dane then reveals that during their staged altercation, JD quietly grabbed Mike's phone. Dane then reveals that Mike is the one who called the local cops, set the house on fire, and trying to steal the rip the whole night. Mike denies the accusation. Dane then admits that he's been lying to everyone, even JD. He nods and says that he only learned the full truth recently. In a flashback, we see Dane pointing a gun at JD, then lowering it. Dane tells JD there was never a Crime Stopper tip. Instead, he received a text from a burner phone from Jackie on the night she was killed. Dane explains that he orchestrated the entire play to find out who actually killed Jackie. Dane admits he lied to him because he needed everyone to believe the act. He also reveals that Jackie suspected someone inside the police force was corrupt and planned to use this rip as bait to flush them out, but she was killed before she could. Who could it be? JD asks. We'll find out tonight, Dane replies, and then adds that Mike is one of them. Dane tells Mike he knows he's the culprit, but wanted to find out who he's working with. JD turns to Nix and asks where the radios are and who's monitoring them, because they're transporting a massive amount of cash across Miami. Nix says he couldn't get higher approval for backup at this hour. JD points out that he told him how much the rip was worth. Nix fires back that JD also told him Dane was dirty. Dane tells Mike he acted dirty to see who would show up to steal the money. JD then accuses Nix outright, saying he's the one who called the house and shot it up with VCAT cops. Nix denies the accusation, insisting he's not corrupt. Mike asks for his burner phone back and dials a number. Moments later, the phone inside Nix's vest starts ringing. Nix immediately shoots Mike. The driver raises his weapon and tries to shoot JD and Dane, but JD reacts first and kills him. However, Nix manages to take both JD and Dane hostage, ordering his colleague to dump Dio's body in the street. JD mutters under his breath. JD asks Nix if he killed Jackie. Nix shakes his head, but Mike, bleeding, says that Nix did. JD's phone rings. He slowly pulls it out and puts it on speaker. His brother Dell's voice comes through. He says they've spotted the truck entering the street. It's revealed that JD messaged his brother earlier with their location. Nix tries to convince JD and Dane that they could all live like kings with this kind of money. While Nix is distracted, Mike fires his gun. Chaos erupts. Both Mike and Nix manage to flee, each grabbing a bag. JD goes after Nix while Dane pursues Mike. After an intense car chase, JD finally catches up to Nix near an overpass. Nix opens the bag and finds no cash inside as JD had swapped the money with old telephone book. Nix raises his gun and tries to shoot, but JD fires first, killing him. Meanwhile, Dane chases Mike through the marshes. After a tense pursuit, he finally captures him and snaps the handcuffs on. The team turns over the money to the FBI, $20,650,480. Desi is awarded $4 million for being a confidential informant. JD embraces his brother, apologizing for their fight the day before. Desi then thanks Dane, saying, "You knew I'd tell Mike everything." Dane nods and replies that he trusted she would do the right thing. She mentions the murdered policewoman, the one she had spoken to. "Jackie," Dane says, "and because of Jackie, we got to you." Desi looks once more at the tattoo. This time, Dane explains its meaning. It was the last question his son ever asked him, "Are we the good guys?" before dying of cancer at the age of 10. "And I told him," Dane says quietly, "We are, and we always will be."